Most people are not losing because they're weak. They're losing because they're playing by rules that were designed to keep them manageable. Every time someone told you to be patient, to wait your turn, to not rock the boat, that wasn't wisdom. That was someone else protecting their position by neutralizing yours. Power has never been handed to the deserving. It goes to whoever understood the game clearly enough to play it. And Niccolo Machiavelli understood this better than almost anyone who ever lived. Machiavelli was a Florentine diplomat who spent 14 years watching how real power actually worked. Not the version taught in churches or written in philosophy books, the actual version. The one happening in back rooms between powerful families, in the cold calculations of men like Cesare Borgia and the Medici, who smiled in public and outmaneuvered everyone in private. When the Medici returned to power in 1512, they had him arrested, tortured, and exiled. He wrote The Prince partly to earn his way back into political favor. It didn't work. But the ideas were so precise and so useful that the Catholic Church banned the book. His name became an insult, and yet the people who actually ran things kept reading it quietly while condemning it publicly. That gap between what people say they believe and what they actually use, that's the whole lesson. Here are 21 rules from that tradition, not softened, the way Machiavelli meant them. The first rule is this: appear cooperative, but think independently. The first thing power requires is that you never fully reveal how you think. Most people confuse agreement with alignment. They assume that because someone is nodding along, that person shares their goals. The ruler who survives is the one who can work within a system while privately evaluating whether that system serves him. Lorenzo de' Medici ran Florence for decades doing exactly this, letting others believe they were being heard while the real decisions happened elsewhere. The second rule is one people resist hearing, but it might be the most important one on this list. Never rely on the goodwill of others. Goodwill is not a resource, it's a feeling, and feelings change with circumstances. Men will abandon you the moment staying loyal costs them something real. Not because they're evil, but because when their interests are genuinely threatened, the math won't favor you. Build obligation, mutual interest, situations where loyalty has a real cost to break. When Caesar was building his political base, he didn't just make friends, he made people financially dependent on him. That's a different kind of loyalty entirely. The third rule: control how people perceive you before they get the chance to decide what to think of you. Perception moves faster than reality. By the time most people investigate the truth, they've already formed a judgment, and that judgment becomes the filter through which everything else gets interpreted. Augustus Caesar was deliberate about every public image he projected. The modest clothes, the approachable manner, the carefully staged simplicity. He ran the largest empire in the Western world while presenting himself as a reluctant public servant. Nobody who mattered believed it completely. Everyone acted as if they did. The fourth rule cuts against something most people feel instinctively. People forgive injury more easily than insult. You can take something from them, and given enough time, they'll rationalize it. But embarrass them, make them feel small in front of people whose opinions they care about, they will carry that far longer than any material loss. If you have to move against someone, do it cleanly and completely. Never leave them standing and humiliated. The Pazzi conspirators attacked Lorenzo de' Medici in 1478, killed his brother, and left Lorenzo wounded but alive. Lorenzo spent the rest of his life making sure the Pazzi family was completely erased from Florence. That's what leaving someone standing and humiliated produces. The fifth rule is one of the most operationally useful things Machiavelli ever wrote. Do necessary, unpleasant things all at once. Do good things slowly. If you have hard decisions to make them in a single move. Pain delivered in installments stays fresh. People can't begin adjusting because they don't know when it stops, but pain that arrives all at once gives people a fixed thing to respond to. Recovery can begin. Gradual positive change, on the other hand, keeps goodwill renewable. Each improvement feels like a gift. Cesare Borgia understood this. He sent a brutal enforcer into the Romagna region to establish order, then publicly executed that same enforcer once the work was done, presenting himself as the man who ended the cruelty. One move created order. One move bought genuine goodwill. The sixth rule: pick your enemies carefully because they define you to everyone watching. An enemy who is too small makes you look petty. An enemy who is far too powerful makes you look reckless. The right adversary is one whose defeat demonstrates something real about your capability. Napoleon didn't just fight battles, he chose which victories would travel, which opponents would give his name a specific kind of weight. The Egyptian campaign was militarily complicated and strategically unnecessary, but it placed him in the lineage of Alexander the Great. That impression returned more value than the territory ever could. The seventh rule: let others absorb the reaction to hard decisions when it costs you nothing to do so. Every position of real authority requires decisions that will make people angry. The question is not whether that reaction gets generated, it will be. The question is who absorbs it. When a proxy can carry out an unpopular action without requiring you to act dishonestly or sacrifice someone unfairly, Machiavelli says there is no virtue in volunteering yourself as the target. Save your credibility, it's finite. Renaissance popes understood this. Excommunications and political ultimatums were delivered through intermediaries, keeping the institution above the immediate conflict.
The eighth rule: understand that generosity is a weapon and most people are using it wrong. Public generosity builds loyalty more efficiently than private generosity because a gift given in front of an audience rewards one person and signals to 20 others what you're capable of. But generosity with no strategic awareness behind it, Machiavelli doesn't call that virtue, he calls it waste. The Medici financed artists, scholars, and philosophers not purely out of love for culture, but because cultural patronage was the most cost-effective way to build a network of internationally connected, publicly prominent allies. The return on Botticelli was social capital that no amount of direct financial bribery could have purchased. The ninth rule is the one that follows Machiavelli everywhere and is almost always misread. Fear is more reliable than love, but you must never use it carelessly. He does not say, become feared. He says fear is more durable than affection because it doesn't depend on the other person's circumstances staying favorable to you. But fear must never cross into hatred. A person who fears you will comply. A person who fears and hates you will wait for any available window. Sulla used terror effectively to consolidate Roman power and died of natural causes, but the hatred his methods generated was so complete that Caesar, decades later, made a deliberate public performance of clemency. Not because he was softer, but because he had studied what Sulla's approach produced in the long run and calculated that mercy was the more efficient tool. The 10th rule: never be neutral when it costs you nothing to choose a side. Neutrality feels like safety. What it actually signals is that you lack the confidence to commit, and the strategic reality is worse than the optics. You gain no meaningful allies and you still generate resentment on both sides, just with nothing to show for it. Florence tried to stay neutral in the conflicts between France and the major Italian powers during the late 15th century. When France won, Florence wasn't treated as a respectful bystander. They were treated as irrelevant. They had avoided commitment entirely and were rewarded accordingly. The 11th rule: surround yourself with people who will tell you what's true, not what you want to hear. Machiavelli spent a full chapter on this because he watched it destroy capable rulers repeatedly. Advisors learn quickly what the person in charge wants to hear. Over time, they calibrate. The ones who deliver hard truths make the leader uncomfortable. The ones who affirm and flatter tend to stay. And gradually, the leadership team drifts away from reality until reality arrives in a form that can't be managed. The correction isn't just hiring honest people, it's creating conditions where honesty genuinely costs less than flattery. Frederick the Great required his generals to argue against his plans before adoption, not because he was always wrong, but because he needed his thinking stress-tested before the battle, not during it. The 12th rule: study failure more carefully than success. Success is easy to misread. The timing might have been perfect, your opponent might have made a critical error, external conditions might have aligned in ways that won't repeat. Failure is more specific, more honest. When something collapses, the reason tends to show itself clearly. After the fall of the Western Roman Empire, the Eastern Roman Empire spent serious effort studying exactly what went wrong in the West: currency debasement, over-reliance on mercenaries, administrative corruption, overextended borders. They built policy around not repeating those specific failures, and their version of the empire survived for nearly another 1,000 years. The 13th rule: move before you are forced to. Problems are like disease, easy to address early, expensive when they're advanced, and often fatal if you wait until the symptoms are undeniable. The ruler who waits for certainty before acting will always be acting too late. Cardinal Richelieu, the man who actually governed France in the early 17th century while Louis XIII held the title, built his entire career on this principle. He didn't wait for the Huguenots to organize a full rebellion. He didn't wait for noble factions to consolidate their resources. He moved while each threat was still a problem rather than a crisis, at a cost he could control. The 15th rule: build structures that outlast your personal involvement. A ruler who is indispensable has not built power, he has rented it. When he leaves, it goes with him. Real power means the systems you've built continue to serve your interests even when you're no longer personally present to maintain them. Napoleon built the Napoleonic Code, a legal framework that restructured property rights and civil governance across his territories. When his military empire collapsed, the legal architecture remained. France, Belgium, Louisiana, Quebec, they still operate on its foundations today. The man has been gone 200 years, the structure he built has not. The 15th rule, and one Machiavelli returned to repeatedly because he watched it defeat men he genuinely admired: adapt or lose. Your methods must change when the circumstances change. Hannibal Barca is the clearest example. By any measure, one of the most gifted military strategists Rome ever faced. He crossed the Alps. He won at Trebia, at Lake Trasimene, at Cannae, a battle military historians still study today. But when Rome changed strategy and refused to engage him in a decisive battle, using attrition instead, Hannibal could not adapt. He spent 16 years in Italy, winning engagements, never losing a major battle, and ultimately failing to achieve the strategic objective because the approach that worked brilliantly in one context couldn't shift when the context changed around it.
What I'm about to show you in the final 6 rules is what Machiavelli himself said he was most afraid to publish. The first 15 deal with managing people and situations. These last 6 deal with something more fundamental: how power works at the level of systems, narrative, and legacy. He buried these ideas deeper in the text because he understood that in the wrong hands, they could be used to dismantle the very structures that kept civilization functional. Here they are. The 16th rule, and the one that generated more outrage than anything else Machiavelli wrote: the appearance of virtue is more useful than virtue itself. He is not saying don't be virtuous. He is saying that in the political world, appearing to hold equality, mercy, generosity, honesty does most of the work that actually possessing it would do. And appearing to possess it without being fully constrained by it gives you more flexibility when the moment requires something the virtue would prohibit. Ferdinand of Aragon consistently framed acts of political aggression and conquest in the language of religious duty and righteous justice. His contemporaries understood what he was doing. They respected it as craft. The framing allowed the broader population to support his actions through a narrative that felt legitimate, and that legitimacy did work that raw force alone could never have done as efficiently. The 17th rule, and the one that generated more outrage than anything else Machiavelli wrote,
Fortune rewards boldness, but only those who've actually prepared to meet it. Machiavelli describes fortune as a river that periodically floods. The unprepared are swept away. Those who built levees in advance get to direct it. When genuine opportunity arrives, and it does for everyone at some point, the person who has been building capability, relationships, and resources can act on it. The person waiting to feel ready cannot. Cosimo de' Medici was exiled from Florence in 1433 by his rivals, but he had spent years building alliances, funding loyalists, embedding himself in the city's commercial networks. When the political tide shifted a year later, he returned to a city where the infrastructure for his return had already been laid. His enemies had nothing comparable to draw on. The 18th rule is the one people most resist, which is usually a signal it deserves the most serious attention. If you must move against an opposing power, move against it completely. Incomplete victories are frequently worse than no victory at all. A weakened opponent is not a neutralized one. A rival who knows what you attempted, who now has perfect information about your intentions and your willingness to act, that person has nothing left to protect. The worst outcome is making your move, making your intention clear, and failing to follow through. Rome's early republican expansion understood this. Defeated territories weren't left with symbolic autonomy while being quietly dominated, an arrangement that generates permanent resentment. They were absorbed, given rights and obligations, given inclusion. The incentive to rebuild resistance was removed. Half measures were not a policy. The 19th rule, and the one most institutions discover too late, your biggest threat almost always comes from within your own structure. External enemies are visible. Internal threats move with you. They have access to your information, your plans, your vulnerabilities. The rulers most likely to be destroyed were rarely brought down by outside forces first. They were undermined from within, by advisors given too much independent authority, by allies who had accumulated enough resources that their interests had separated from yours. The first triumvirate, Caesar, Pompey, and Crassus, made each of them more powerful than any could have been alone. And then, as each grew stronger through the alliance, their independent interests grew stronger too. The civil war between Pompey and Caesar didn't come from outside Rome. It came from within the architecture of power they had built together. The 20th rule, and the honest appraisal of what it means to influence the world, institutions outlast individuals. Build them, or accept that your influence ends when your presence ends. An individual operates at human scale. An institution operates at generational scale. A prince who rules through personal authority alone gives everything back at death. Napoleon built the Napoleonic Code into the legal structure of every territory he controlled. His military empire collapsed. The legal framework remained and still shapes daily life for hundreds of millions of people across multiple continents 2 centuries later. That is what building at the institutional level produces when it's done with intention. And the 21st rule, the final one, is the one that contains all the others. The greatest power is to make your interest appear to be everyone's interest. Force is expensive. Persuasion is expensive. The most efficient form of power is the kind where the people inside your structure genuinely believe that what you want is also what they want. Not because they've been deceived, but because you've aligned the language, the incentives, and the narrative so completely that the arrangement feels natural, feels like common sense, feels like the obvious way things should be. The Church framed Roman authority as divine order. The Medici framed Florentine commercial dominance as cultural flourishing. Augustus framed one-man rule as the rescue of republican tradition. The structure maintains itself not through constant force, but through genuine buy-in from the people inside it. That is the ceiling of what power can become. There is one principle underneath all 21 of these rules. The world is not organized by fairness. It is organized by whoever understands it most clearly and is willing to act on that understanding, consistently, over time, without waiting for permission. The people who feel like the world is unfair usually are right.
The ones who stay stuck in that feeling have turned an accurate observation into a reason to stay exactly where they are. Machiavelli looked at the same unfair world and asked a different question. Given that this is how it actually works, what do you do with it? That question is still the right one 500 years later, because the structure of how power moves, how influence is built, how loyalty works, and why it breaks, that hasn't changed. Machiavelli was describing something durable. You're not playing the game they taught you in school. You never were. You're playing the one Machiavelli mapped out 5 centuries ago. Most people just refuse to read it. Now you have.
If something in what we covered actually landed, you already know this isn't the kind of content that shows up everywhere. It's built for the ones who'd rather see the game clearly than feel comfortable inside it. If that's you, subscribe. Not because we asked, because you've already decided this is worth your attention. New videos, same standard, no filler. We'll see you in the next one.